Hey, we're ready to get started getting customers. I hope you guys are excited because right now I'm gonna smash that excitement with some sad news. In this upcoming section, yes, we are gonna go after potential customers and get our first couple sales, but everything in this section is manual effort. You heard in the previous lectures, we talked about the graph of effort and customers. We're focusing on the first section, which is low effort, low reward, but that effort comes from you because we want to save resources until we are 100% sure we know exactly what we're doing and what we're offering. So yes, these techniques are not going to be glamorous, and these techniques are not going to get you 1,000 customers, let alone 100, but what they will get you is your first set of customers. Now, sometimes getting over that initial hump of getting your first customer is all you need to actually feel validated and motivated that you, yes, can start this business and grow it. Trust me, the first time that you see that order button get clicked and an order placed, or the first time you get an invoice for your first sale, that is a huge moment and is one of the best things about being a business owner. Conversely, one of the most discouraging things that can happen to an entrepreneur is spending hundreds of hours building a product, pouring your effort and your life and your soul into some product that then just flounders and doesn't get a sale for an extended period of time. It happens to a lot of people out there. It's incredibly discouraging, and it makes you feel like you're just wasting your time. So that's what we're gonna do in this section. We're gonna specifically target getting you over that hump. It's a big block, and that's why we're gonna use some tried and true manual efforts to get over that so you can feel like, yes, you can do it. Now, you won't be a multi-millionaire at the end of this section, and if you are already a multi-millionaire because you're rich beforehand, call me. But what we will do is establish that your product is real and is needed. And most importantly, don't forget this, we will finally establish a feedback loop with real live customers. This is the feedback where we're going to gather and incorporate into our business so that we can go to the next stages with ease. Let me tell you right now, if you do not start working with real customers, getting real feedback, you run the risk of completely blowing out and failing at the higher effort, higher reward strategies. You cannot just jump right into a content strategy, for instance, without first getting some real customers, figuring out who they are exactly, what they like, what they respond to, what your product benefits are, and what are its weaknesses. And you need to get that from real customers, not just yourself and your friends. All right, get excited, but don't get too excited because we are gonna get some sales, but it's gonna be in a quick and dirty fashion that is not at all glamorous. All right, one of the wonderful things about the internet is that it is indexable. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I'm driving my Toyota Prius down the highway, and for whatever reason, the accelerator gets stuck. Maybe later, if I'm alive, I might go online and complain about it, saying that when I hit the accelerator, it doesn't seem to unaccelerate. Well, because of the way that the internet works, anyone who is looking for people complaining about that specific braking and acceleration problem will probably be able to find what I said online, regardless of whether or not they saw exactly where I posted it, when I posted it, or if they organically stumbled upon it. That indexableness, yes, just made that term up, is what we're gonna exploit with this strategy. Now, this strategy really only takes like 30 minutes to do, and if it works for you, it is something that you can replicate in a small scale fashion. Now, in the last section, we had a lecture on understanding your customer's pain point. Now, if you haven't watched that lecture, please pause this one, go back and watch it. That one is crucial to understanding so much of what we do later in this course. You're not really gonna be successful getting customers if you don't understand why they're buying your stuff. What you should have gotten from that lecture is 1 to 2 general ideas of what problem your product or service solves. Now, if you also remember from the lecture, we know that all products and services, all business ideas spring from solving problems. They all solve problems, even if you don't think it's so. Even products you wouldn't associate with being problem solving still do. Let's take an example. If you're playing an iPhone app, let's say you're playing Flappy Bird or Angry Birds, what problem does that solve? It solves boredom. More specifically, boredom when you're driving in a car or boredom when you're waiting for your doctor's appointment, short periods of time in which you are bored. Now, when you combine the fact that all ideas spring from problems and that the internet is wonderfully indexable, I think you see where I'm going with this. We can find some customers that have our specific pain point. And if they have an itch and our product is the ointment for that itch, you better believe that if we just connect the dots for them, they'll buy our stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get into the mind of our potential customers, figure out how they would verbalize their problems, and then we're gonna use that as a way to find them and potentially get them to buy our products. All right, we're gonna talk about how exactly you find them. Then in the next lecture, we'll talk about how once you found them, how do you reach out to them. Now this is our first technique because it is laser focused. If someone out there has the problem you are trying to solve and your product obviously solves a problem, it's a very good chance they will buy your stuff. And there's not gonna be a whole lot of dependencies involved. They're not gonna ask you how many other people have bought it. They're not gonna have to say, well, I haven't seen a TV commercial for it. If they have that problem, they are always the most likely to purchase. Now, the first thing we wanna do is take that problem and imagine we are the customer that has it. Now, how exactly would that customer unwittingly verbalize that problem? How exactly would you mention you have this problem? How would you explain it? And in what scenarios would you bring it up? Try to get in the mind of your overly complainy older sister and try to channel their obsessive need to constantly notify everyone of things that bother them. To help you through it, let's cover a couple examples. All right, example number one. Let's imagine we are making an app, and this app, mobile app, is designed to help people stop forgetting where they put things, to help people stop losing things, essentially. Now, you yourself right now, try to imagine you're someone that constantly loses things. How exactly would you verbalize it? Now, first of all, we just need to kind of think it out, right? Now, if I lose things, well, everybody loses things. What are the most common things they would lose? Well, the most common things people lose, probably keys, credit cards, wallets, hair if you're older. Now let's just take one of those. If I lost my keys, I would probably use the phrase, lost my keys. I would probably say things like, constantly losing my keys, can't stop losing my keys, anything along that vein. I would even probably ask the question of anything to help me stop losing my keys, anything to prevent losing my keys. The key point here, no pun intended, is that they will say losing keys. So those are the phrases we will hook onto, and if you couldn't find someone off that, you'd move on to the next item or the next type of complaint that someone would voice. All right, now a second example. Let's say we're making a web application and it helps people track their social media mentions. You know, like in Facebook, when someone mentions something and they say at your name, or on Twitter, they mention you, or Instagram, they do it as well. Now, if I had that problem, I might think of saying, can't manage my social media accounts. Too many followers, too many mentions. Can't find list of mentions plus Twitter plus Facebook, something like that. If you can identify the problem, and we've done that before, and you can identify generally how someone would articulate it, then basically 100% of the time you will find someone who has said that. Now, the three places you should first start searching, you probably know, and I apologize because this is a very basic technique. The first one is Twitter. You've heard of that one. The second one is Reddit. You might have heard of it, maybe not. And the third one, everyone's heard of this one, Google. Now, the first one we start with and our go-to, always number one we go to, is Twitter. Now, why exactly do we use Twitter first? Well, for one, they let all of their conversations be indexable. That is why I don't say Facebook. You cannot go and search and find a conversation some private user on Facebook had, whereas Twitter, it's kind of the point. It's all about being public and everyone seeing your stuff. Twitter also as a whole has a very large user base. It's something like 300 million, and it's really just a giant hub of conversations, and more specifically, a giant hub of complaints. Now, the first thing you do if you want to search on Twitter is just go to search.twitter.com. It'll link you to the actual URL that I can never seem to remember. It's like search home. And if you can't find that, just Google Twitter search. So what it ends up giving you is a big search bar that basically looks like anything you'd see on Google. Now, we don't need to get fancy with this one, right? We can just search for exactly the types of complaints we came up with previously. Just input those and then try to weed through the results and try to find people that are actually specifically talking about your problem. It is really that simple, but it's not terribly easy to weed through all the chatter to find ones that are talking about what you are talking about. But do your best, find some people, write them down, mark them so you can come back later and reach out to them. Now, the second place that we are going to comb through for potential complainers is Reddit. Now, have you ever heard of Reddit? It's reddit.com. It is basically a forum on steroids. You know how forums work, right? People post individual topics and then people talk about it, and there's main topics and specific topics. Well, Reddit's like that. Reddit is divided into what are called subreddits, and subreddits are basically just like miniature forums within a gigantic forum. Now, most people know Reddit for probably nefarious reasons or pranks that people play, but it is an enormous forum. Reddit has 231 million users, and they have something like 8 billion pages. They're one of the biggest pages on the internet, but more importantly, because they're structured in subreddits and Reddits, there are subreddits basically for everything out there. Horse breeding, scuba diving, people who are obsessed with one celebrity, people who have the first name Adam, pretty much anything you can think of, there is a subreddit directly or indirectly related to it. We are going to keep coming back to Reddit because it is just a goldmine of potential customers. So get cozy with this one. Now, how does one exactly search through this community to find the people that we want? Well, it's a trick question. You don't. You don't actually have to search or navigate through the community structure of Reddit. All you have to do is search for the complainers. Now, Reddit is like a lot of websites in that they have a search bar. You can see it when you log in or you just go to the front page. But that search bar does not work very well at all. Instead, we're going to use a workaround because it's 10 times better and a lot faster. Actually, just go to Google. Go to Google. We're going to use a very basic trick to search Reddit through Google's search engine. So what you do is you just go up to the search box. The first thing you type is site, S-I-T-E, Reddit.com. No spaces at all in that. What that means is we say site equals. What we're telling Google is that we don't want you to search the entire internet. We only want to search pages that come from the domain reddit.com. And then after you type site:reddit.com, then actually put in your normal search criteria. So use your complainy search terms, get creative, and use that operator at the beginning of your Google search. And most likely you will find some stuff. Write them down, come back to them later. And then the last one is the most obvious, Google. I mean, Google, we're on it already, so it's very convenient. Just take those search criteria and just do a generic search for it. I mean, it's such the case that we cannot possibly search all active communities online for people who have our potential problem, but Google can. So try your best to search and pick out some people, regardless of what site or domain they're on, that you can reach out to. Okay. So I'm gonna make something up. This was part of that startup competition I was just in yesterday. I was a judge for it. Someone pitched an idea for something. I'm not gonna say exactly what it was, but it helped people transfer money to India. Okay, so let's pretend that was our service. That's not exactly what they were doing. We have some service that transfers money to India. So typically that's going to solve a problem that people can't transfer it, probably. They're probably having trouble finding a way to transfer it, or they just can't find a way to send back wages or pay people in India. I'm not sure. So probably what I would do is focus on someone complaining about transferring to India or can't send money to India, and they'll probably see where that takes me. Okay. So the first thing, remember, we just go to Twitter. And right here in the bar, we're just going to try a couple things. So I'm going to say transfer to India. Now, I could say can't transfer to India. Let's see what it says. Can't transfer to India. But the reason why I might shy away from these is because on Twitter, you can only put 180 characters. So long sentences like that might actually be broken up because people have to save time. So they might not say to, they might put the number. They might abbreviate can't to CNT or something like that. So we'll see. Okay, so off of that, we can scan through these. And I can see 2 people right off the bat. So one person is saying, can someone volunteer to spare something to transfer to India? Need to order something and they can't make a payment from PK. I'm guessing that's Pakistan, whatever. Okay, so that was one. We would mark that one down and we could reach out to that person. Looks like we have another one. Trying to transfer money to India for an urgent need. What the, you guys can't fix your blank online services for more than 48 hours. That guy is complaining about another service. Maybe you could swoop them up, talk to that person. This guy's complaining again, both MG and PP can transfer to India online, but W can't. Western Union can't transfer to India. I didn't know that, actually. So that's another person we could actually talk to. Great. Okay, 3 people right there we could reach out to. Those are some great leads. Let's go back to the search bar. Let's just try more broadly, transfer to India. See what that gives us. Okay, so let's see. We have one person advertising a service that does that. Looks like a lot of people are complaining about something topical, something in the news. So let's try something a little more broad. We'll just try transfer money to India instead of can't transfer money. See what we get. Okay. We have one person, it looks like they're pitching their service. We don't really want to go to those people. Another person pitching. Here's one person that is happy about their rate. You could potentially reach out to the person. That's necessarily a complaint. And here we go. Here's a complaint. Hello, Transfast World. How long do you take to transfer money from India, from Canada? It's already 50 hours. Kindly respond. That person is having trouble transferring money to India. There you go. There's another one. And it looks like another person is roughly complaining. He's saying he can transfer money between bank accounts from the US to India, but not true for all accounts. You could maybe reach out to the person whether or not they have an issue with one specific account. Okay, we can try again. We could try something. Now we have, I think, 5 people. We could say can't send. We'll just say send money to India and see if that's broad enough. Okay, and this one's broad, but we can still pick out some people. Looks like people are complaining about Pakistan. Can't ever search for India without complaints about Pakistan. This person says, we are facing a lot of trouble sending money through the Maldives to India. Still counts as sending money to India. That person is complaining that he has a problem with it. Here is another one. 30 minutes on the phone to send money to India. Now I have to go into a branch, sign papers. This process is broken. Very dramatic, but that guy is a very good potential customer for our service. Okay, we just grabbed 7 right there. And I don't know how long that took me. That only took me about 5 minutes to do, and I got 7 people. Great. All right, now let's try the Reddit technique. So remember, it's site reddit.com, and then we'll use the same search terms. Can't transfer money to India. All right, and it looks like right off the bat, someone started a discussion about how they can send money. This person wants to know the best option, easiest, cheapest, best ways. I mean, anywhere in here you could pitch them. I mean, they probably are having trouble. That's why they're asking. Looks like someone here is asking, why does it take 100 days to transfer money to India versus other countries? That probably has a problem. Here's a person complaining. They have PayPal restrictions, probably trying to send money through PayPal. Here's another person complaining about transferring funds without any fees back and through India. That's another person, probably has a problem with it. What you would want to do is just hop in here and read them and see whether or not they do exactly fit your problem. Okay, this person is trying to send $50 every month to his grandparents. He's trying to figure out what the best way to do it is. He's concerned about fees. Okay, so that's a legitimate one. What you could actually then do is reach out to them. We cover that in the next lecture, so stay tuned for that. Okay, and then the last one was just Google. I can just go back to here and just drop this and just go through that, okay? And then just see what happens. Okay, here we go. I mean, looks like on digitalpoint.com, some random forum, someone is straight up complaining about how you can't transfer money. It says from India, but you could probably find someone who's to. We have some people asking it on Quora. Remember, Quora was one of the ones we mentioned that's usually pretty good for this technique. Can't transfer funds. Look at all these people. Tons of people just complaining. We have quite a lot to work with, right? Oh, it's only been like 8 minutes, and look at all the possible leads I have found. You could do this all day long. The last part of this strategy, number 1. Last part, reaching out to them. How do you do it, and how can you be effective while doing it? So how do you do it? Well, it's relatively easy. So let's start with the first place that we covered, which was Twitter. Now, the first thing you need to do is create a Twitter account. It's very easy. You hit sign up, you fill out some information, you put a profile photo, yada, yada, yada. You should be done in 15 seconds. Now, I honestly suggest that if you're not doing this technique, you're not going out and talking to people who specifically have your problem, you still make a Twitter account. Why? Because a lot of the techniques in this course, we're going to use Twitter because it's incredibly useful for growing your business. Even in this section, we will cover more broad ways that you can build a Twitter page and use that to grow your business. So don't skip over it. At a minimum, create an account. So we're going to use the Twitter account, not for broad purposes, but for messaging specific people. Once you have the account, now you're ready to roll. So go back to the list of people that you found. And now you have 2 options. 1, you can direct message them, or 2, you can tweet at them. Now, those of you that are out there that have absolutely no idea what Twitter is, it's a system where you can create an account and have people follow you, and then you can send messages that are 180 characters long about whatever you want to, mention other people, mention articles, share how you are feeling at the time, and all the people that are following can see it. So it's a big web of communication, complaints, and celebrity gossip. Now, the 2 ways that they allow you to communicate with each other is by sending direct messages, just like the same way you do it in Facebook, or even LinkedIn, or any other platform, really. And the other one is tweeting. Tweeting is when you share those 180 character posts. And then tweeting at someone is when you either tweet to them and mention them, or you reply to their individual tweet. Hopefully that didn't just boggle your mind. It's really not that confusing. Now, between the differences of direct messaging or tweeting at them, if you can direct message them, that is better. And direct messaging will show up in this one section right over here when you can do it. Now, you can only direct message people if they follow you. That's the catch. So that means that you can only direct message people that you already have some established contact with. Now, if that is an option to you, you already have a Twitter following and these people just so happen to be following you, great, message them. That's gonna get you the best ROI. Now, if you can't direct message them and you still wanted to pursue this avenue, here's one strategy. What you can do is go to their page and just follow them. If you follow them, they get notified that you followed them. There's a good chance that they will follow you back, at which point you can direct message them. Worst case scenario, they don't follow you back, but they might go to your page and check out your website, which is essentially the same thing anyway. Now, if direct messaging just doesn't work out for you, the other alternative is tweeting at them. Now, again, you can tweet at them generically or specifically respond to their tweet. I suggest you respond to their tweet. Now, the way you do this is you find the complaint, the specific thing that you had identified before as them having the complaint, them self-identifying as having this problem, and you click the reply button. Now, craft your own response. I'll give you some suggestions. Make sure that you include a mention of them. And the way you do this in Twitter is you just put at, and then look at their name. You'll see it up at the top, and say at their name. Now, what that does is it gives them 2 notifications as opposed to 1. If you just reply to them, they get a notification that someone replied to them. But if you did that and mentioned them, they get 2. Someone mentioned you and someone replied to you. Better chance of them seeing it. Once you do that, it's public. They can see what you said and other people can see that you said something to them. So there's a little bit of social pressure to at least acknowledge your message. Now, if they don't respond back to you or start a dialogue and then check out your website, you at least have an ancillary benefit of the fact that you posted on their page and other people will see it. If they're reading the person's complaint, potentially they have the same problem. Now, if they don't respond, don't worry about it. Follow up later, send them another one. If that doesn't work, send them another one. And at that certain point, just let it go. I mean, there's an infinite number of people you can message this way, and guess what? It costs nothing, just your time. Now, the key here when you write a message for responding to someone on Twitter is that you need to connect the specific problem to your specific solution. Don't just say, hey, saw you had a problem, check out our stuff. That is too generic, too salesy. People are just gonna hate that. What you should do is, let's give an example. Let's say someone is complaining about how your software doesn't let them export into Excel. If your software did, you could respond and say, hey, our software exports into Excel and solves some of your other problems. Check it out. That is a correct response. You just helped them, you provided some kind of value, and you showed that you're not just a robot that's generically scanning their information. You're actually trying to talk about what they are talking about. Now let's check out Reddit. Now similar dynamics apply here, because when someone posts something, you can either post a reply or you can direct message them. Again, I suggest direct messaging because more often people will respond to that. Typically, if someone posts on a thread in Reddit and someone replies to them, they might read the first couple replies, but often it just gets buried because a lot of people are posting. They might just not get around to responding, or they might see your response and it's next to like 10 other people who also responded at the same time. But a direct message in general, it's gonna get a higher response rate. And similar to Twitter, if you do end up replying to them on a page, less likely to respond, but there's a chance that other people read it and those people might potentially have that problem, gets you more exposure. Now the key with Reddit, honestly, is timing. Reddit is kind of the case that people just use it when they're bored and they kind of flit from page to page to page. So if you can respond very quickly, if someone posts something and you can get a response while they're still on the website, that dramatically increases the chance of them reading it, responding, starting a dialogue, and potentially getting a customer. Now, my preferred technique for reaching out on Reddit is to try to sound as non-salesy as possible. I'd like to say something along the lines of, since it's a complaint, hey, that sucks. The way I solved it was blank. Or, I had that problem as well. That's why I did this. Remember, you are a human and they are also a human being. You are individuals. They do not want to be treated like something to be pitched to. Reddit especially is grouchy and very sensitive to being marketed towards. So make sure that you read your message, whatever you write, at least twice, and make sure you're trying to be as conversational as possible. Sound like a human, and they will respond to you like a human. The last little bit of advice I'll give you here is make sure that when you are responding on a public thread, you know whether or not you're responding to the individual person and their problem and what they said, or the group post as a whole, because there's generally a theme, and then everyone's responding to it. So you're either responding to a response or the initial response, and everyone is talking in a tangential kind of angle. If you don't pay attention to how you're doing that, you can come off sounding like an idiot. You can respond to someone's individual complaint, but their complaint was about the complaint or the topic that everyone is talking about, and it just sounds like you're out of the loop. It'll really hurt you. And the last one, Google. Well, to be honest with you, this one is just a crapshoot, right? Because Google can search literally anything, so you're gonna find a lot of different stuff. Now, there's a lot of different mediums that you'll find people complaining, and in general, they kind of fall into 3 different categories. 1, they're gonna be sites and platforms that allow direct communication, great. 2, they're gonna be sites that allow passive participation. You can post like a comment or a reply, and hopefully they read it or someone else passing by sees it. And 3, there is no channel for communicating between users or with the person who originally posted. Now, some places are better than others, and I try to pick these out of the crowd earlier on. Quora.com is a great one, question and answer website where people are actually serious. It's not Yahoo Answers. People will post legitimate things on there. You can post as a reply or reply to other people's reply. You can actually get a very good back and forth, and you can direct message, which is great. Meetup.com, that's another example of one. It's passive communication, so you can post on the walls. You can kind of participate in the threads, and you can send messages to people, but there's a lot of weird rules around it. But you can find groups that are around your topic. Then you can look in the threads and see if people are complaining about specific things. And then past that, any niche forum is gonna be great. You know, if you are looking for complaints about something related to video equipment, there are bajillion forums with thousands of people in them. You just gotta find one of them, sign up, and then same thing. You know, for all of these, the name of the game is the exact same thing. You're gonna sign up, you're gonna find the people, you're either gonna try to direct message them or reply to them publicly. You're gonna try to relate your post directly to their problem, try to sound as human and not as salesy as possible. Try your best to start a dialogue. If you start a dialogue, you can convince them to buy your stuff, and if they don't buy your stuff, well, at least you got some feedback. Now, if you've run into a blog, well, post in the comments. People will see that. If you can't post in the comments, well, try to fish out the email, the person who posted it, or some of the people that have commented. Some types of blogs will allow you to find their email address or to click through to their user account where you can then message them. And if you can't do either one of those, well, continue through the course because we will cover ways that you can contact people that you shouldn't have any way of contacting them. It's a bit of a trick, but you'll learn it later. All right, guys, get out there and do this. Questions, concerns about this strategy as a whole, just let me know. If you do this long enough and you persevere and you don't just give up easily, you will find a customer. And worst case scenario, you will get some feedback about your idea, which is crucial because when you move on to the next strategy or the next strategy, you're more likely to be successful. So in the past, we covered how there are a lot of ways of finding people who are complaining about the problem you solve, and Twitter was just merely one of those ways of finding complainy people. But outside of people just complaining about their lives, which might just sum up human existence, Twitter is still a goldmine for a lot of things business. You see, Twitter is just a beehive of people that are talking about pretty much anything. Unlike Facebook, you can see and join the conversations of literally anyone on it. There are pretty much no restrictions in that regard, unless you're stalking someone and they block you. And oh, as I like to point out, there are roughly 300 million people that use it monthly. There are some people who practically live on this service, like our president. Because it's an open field of people talking and displaying their interest, that's why we use it, and that's why we use it early on in our business development efforts. We are still focusing on getting those first 10 precious customers, and we don't want to have to, say, build out a 6-month content marketing strategy just to get to the point of 10 customers. For those of you that are not familiar, Twitter is just a social network where you communicate through 140-character tweets, which are really just messages that get posted onto a timeline that is very similar to, say, like a Facebook newsfeed, and then anyone who is following you can read those. If you're active on it and you help people out, you'll get a following. Pretty simple. The bigger following you have, the more people will see what you say. Okay, so let's get set up in Twitter real fast so you can follow along with the next strategies. Later on in the course, we're gonna cover how to optimize your profile and then create inbound traffic to it. But right now, we just wanna get set up so we can start sending messages. If you have a Twitter, well, then you can officially skip this part of the lecture. Just press the skip button, see you next lecture. All right, so go to twitter.com, click sign up in the top right. Now, don't be distracted by the news updates about whatever the Kardashians do. I'll satisfy your curiosity and tell you, well, they do nothing on camera for a living. After you hit sign up, fill out your details and just move on. Yes, let Twitter tailor their experience for you. None of that really matters. You do not actually have to add your phone, so just skip it to save time. You can go back and do it later. Pick a username preferably related to your business in some way. Now, you can either create this account for yourself or for your business. An account that's made for yourself might come off as more personal when you send messages, but you'll have to make sure you sound more personal when you communicate. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, just be aware that if it's coming from a person, it should sound like it's coming from a person. Pick whatever username you can get that hasn't yet been taken by the username squatters and proceed to your page. Click through and then you can select some interest. Now, it doesn't really matter what you pick. You can always go back and change this. This is just designed to populate your page on the first time you log in. Then you can decide to follow the suggested users they give you. Again, doesn't really matter. Go for it. If you say yes, then the most recent tweets from those accounts will show up in your newsfeed. Of course, if you say no, well, then your newsfeed is gonna be very, very lonely. Hooray, we are through, and now we have ourselves a brand new Twitter. First thing we wanna do is click on the left-hand side of the picture where you see a picture of an egg, and replace that with an actual human or business logo photo. Find the highest resolution image you have of yourself. I mean yourself, not of a cat or a dog. I usually am fine with you doing that, but not today. Whatever you upload, if it's low resolution, then on Twitter, it's gonna look especially bad and blown out of proportion. Now, once you have that image up, click on your name and then click Edit Profile. Now here, we just wanna make sure we have some information about us. If it's for you as a person, write what the meaning of life is and make sure not to get it wrong. After that, just add a sentence about what you're working on with a link to your business, product, or project. That's really it. We just don't want this to be blank. Okay, hooray again. Now you are on Twitter and you can participate in the next lectures of manually mining some good old-fashioned customers. You can, if you want to, add a cover photo by clicking at the top of the profile in that rectangle. But again, that's really up to you. If you've ever used a service called canva.com, which we'll use throughout this course, you can actually use them to borrow a template for that cover photo. Really, it'll take you 5 minutes. Either way, not a big deal. Yes, we did talk about following news trends and stories before, but this is a bit different. This is different because, number one, something doesn't need to have happened right now to be useful for you. And two, we can use blogs. Blogs are spelled B-L-A-G-S and pronounced blags. We can use blags instead of just what news stories people are talking about at any given moment on Twitter. And before you post in the Slack group that there's no news or blog posts about your industry, every industry has some sort of news or blogs covering it somewhere on the internet. They are out there, you just have to do a little bit of thinking and a little bit of digging. By the end of this lecture, we'll have covered some easy ways to find topical news and relevant blogs for your space. So the idea behind this strategy is that we're gonna go out, search and destroy, find some blags and news that are related to our space and what we're doing, figure out who interacted with the same said blags and news, and then use that as a way to build a list of pre-qualified users that we can then tweet at and interact with on Twitter. Like, duh. If you're just mindlessly sifting through Twitter, as about 80 million people do a day, you aren't going to be able to very effectively tell who is interested in your space or in the problem that you're trying to solve. This is one way of flushing those users out. Okay, so to better conceptualize this, let's use another example business so you can kind of get a better idea of how this works. Let's say your product is, I don't know, a time management app. Maybe your app has some sort of unique approach to time management for super busy people or something like that. Let's say your productivity app is a mobile app that helps people decide what to delegate. If the task is boring, mind-numbingly repetitive, and may or may not include some sort of bodily fluid, well, that's what interns are for, and I'm sure this app is there to remind you of that. Now, since you've probably spent a ton of time researching different time management concepts while you were coming up with the product, I'm guessing you already have a few blog posts or news articles saved somewhere that are on your favorites for the subject. Those bookmarked articles and pieces of news are a great place to start from. Now, if you've been living in a cave since the internet was created, you just recently re-entered civilized society, you saw sunlight, then you saw that Donald Trump was president and you didn't go back into your cave. Oh, and you somehow immediately made a time management app for busy people without actually doing any research on the internet. Well, first of all, welcome back. And second of all, wow, that is honestly impressive. So if you're not what I just described, then keep those articles you have saved somewhere. We'll keep them for a bit later. A good rule of thumb for this technique is to compile about 5 articles, because some articles are going to work better than others. If you have 5 in mind already, congratulations, you are not a caveman. Now, if you don't have 5 articles or any at all, don't worry, because now we're going to go over 2 different ways to find some that will help us connect with more early customers the way we just previously described. One is Google, I'm sure you heard of that one, but we'll use it in a way that you might not actually know about. And the second one we're going to do is a tool called BuzzSumo. And we are going to use both of them to find you some more customers on Twitter. Okay, so for the first one, let's jump over to our trusty friend Google, who has never led us astray, and search for something that fits your industry or might describe your product. For this example, remember, we're working with a time management app, so let's search for time management. Instead of just searching regularly, we're going to click on News here up at the top. That way we won't see a lot of other stuff because it's articles that we're actually interested in. Now, depending on what you're searching for, sometimes Google sticks it in the more section. No one knows why. Well, I do know why, because algorithms. All right, so there we go. Now we can see some recent articles on the topic. Let's pick one and just check it out. Honestly, though, the actual content of the post isn't all that important. As long as the title makes sense, it's related to your product, and the article is written by what looks like a reputable source or a relevant looking blog domain, then it should work fine for what we're going to do with it. What's most important, though, is whether or not people are sharing this article we found on Twitter. Now let's copy the URL of the selected article and head over to search.twitter.com, which we used in a previous demo, and plug it in. You're going to probably see a lot of companies tweeting out articles like this. Just ignore those. You want to find real, actual people who are so into time management that they just had to share it with their followers. They're the type of people that probably use standing desks, dual monitors, and say things like crushing it all the time. Once you found a couple of those, then reply to them like we talked about in an earlier lecture. If you don't remember how to do that without sounding like a spammy sales guy, well, basically you just want to find something they wrote or shared and use that as a way to say something legitimately related to it. Once you get them into a conversation, you can introduce the product or continue the conversation with the idea in mind that you will later introduce it. All right, so that is it. You use Google to find an article, to find people who shared that article, and we know because they shared the article, they're interested in that topic. Let's start a conversation with them. Once you do that, it's very easy to get them to look at your website. Presumably, if what you're selling is worthwhile, they could possibly buy it. All right, now on to the second tool, BuzzSumo. Now, BuzzSumo is a paid tool, and it costs like $100 a month, I think, but you can get limited access without paying or even creating an account. And I'm pretty sure if you really want to go farther with this, they have a free trial period. We're just trying to get you your first 10 customers in this section, so there's really no need to spend roughly 52 orders of large French fries from McDonald's on it per month. True story, I actually have a friend who does that McDonald's French fries calculation to prevent them from buying things and apparently to justify eating more French fries. So we head over to buzzsumo.com. As you can see, there is a search bar right there on the homepage. This is where we'll plug in the keyword time management again, just like we did on Google. And that way we can see a list of articles related to time management. Okay, so now we see a list of articles sorted by the amount of total shares. You can also see the website they're from and when they were published right here below the link. We can open a couple of these up in a new tab, check them out briefly to make sure they make sense like we talked about a moment ago. Again, some might make sense and some might not at all. And then we can just copy the URL of the article and do the exact same thing we did with Twitter. Remember, search.twitter.com, find the people that shared it, interact with those people. What's really great about BuzzSumo is that you're not only gonna find stuff that was shared more widely, but you're also gonna find stuff that's still being shared by people, even though it wasn't published earlier, say, today. So the people that are reading these and sharing these articles were probably actually searching for something related to it, or, this example, time management, and it's very possible they're looking for some sort of solution to their time management problems. They actively went out and sought this information out. Another great thing about BuzzSumo is we don't have to dig around articles to figure out which ones have been shared. This is automatically sorted for us. So why exactly do we use Google then as well in addition to this? Well, give you a pretty quick answer for that one. It's free and it has better coverage. All right, so those are super simple but very effective way to find people that are interested in your product and then isolate them on a platform where you can easily communicate to them and get their attention. Just remember Google News and BuzzSumo, and if you're having a rough time with it, just post to the Slack group and we'll see if we can help you out. In this section of the course, Twitter will definitely come up again more than once later on, but you are off the Twitter hook for a while right after this lecture. In this lecture, we're gonna talk about people on Twitter who are talking about your competitors. Now, there is a reason why people complain about companies on Twitter. And that reason is that almost all businesses have a Twitter account. In fact, as of, I think it was last year, Twitter estimated that almost 2/3 of all US companies have some sort of a presence on Twitter. And when you can't get a response to the numerous emails you sent to a company, or you're like me and too lazy to wait on hold with customer service, why not complain on Twitter? It is public after all, which means you're more likely to get a response from someone at the company. Even if the person responding is one of those millennials who companies hire to run their social media because the executives have no clue how this works. It's like phoning into the customer service line if that conversation was being streamed online for hundreds of people to watch. Now, some companies even have dedicated customer service Twitter accounts. Like, for instance, everyone's favorite ISO, Comcast. ISO, of course, stands for, anyone? Internet Service Overlord. Comcast's customer service account is hilariously called @Comcast Cares, which is probably just the epitome of what we call a corporate facepalm. Regardless, these accounts are a great place to meet people who don't like a company's service. Pretty obvious. Before we jump further into this, we need to talk a little bit about competitors. Technically speaking, what is a competitor? I'm sure some companies come to mind when you're thinking about your product, but let's take a minute or two to try to actually break it down. A competitor is someone who competes for the same users or the same customers. Sounds relatively obvious, but it's actually not. In fact, there are several different ways that you can classify your competitors based on how they compete with you. For instance, a direct competitor is anyone who's targeting the same group of people you are targeting and with a very similar product. They are direct because consumers can do almost like a one-to-one comparison. If you lose a sale, there's a good chance it could instead end up with one of your direct competitors. The other classification worth knowing, we're gonna skip the other two for this lecture, is an indirect competitor. An indirect competitor, on the other hand, goes after not the same customers per se, but the same needs. And they generally are gonna do it with a product that is not really the same, it's pretty different. A restaurant, for instance, is an indirect competitor to, say, a frozen pizza company like DiGiorno. They both solve hunger and a casual lust for pizza. Now, can you guess who might be a direct competitor to DiGiorno? Rubber. A circular tube of rubber you found on the side of the road is a direct competitor to DiGiorno. They are virtually indistinguishable from each other, and if you eat them, presumably you will become full. Now, why bring this up? Well, because it's very easy to lose sight of who the true competitor is. Quick rule of thumb, do they have a similar product targeting the same people, or are they at least targeting the same need or problem, but with something kind of funky and not directly comparable to what you're trying to use? As long as they pass that rule of thumb test, well, then we know we are in fact rubbing shoulders with them. And in this case, that means we should target their unsuspecting Twitter accounts. So open up a spreadsheet and jot down any competitors you already know about. Then just do a bit of Googling around for the other ones. Search using words that people might use to find whatever it is you're working on. You can also try searching for ways that you would describe your business. If need be, flashback to the previous lectures in this section for how you can kind of think through this. You can also jump in the Slack and we can all help you out. Okay, now that you've got a little list of possible competitors, take to google.com and insert the following. Insert the name of the company, the competitor you found, plus, yeah, you guessed it, Twitter. If you add these two keywords together, you'll find their Twitter 99.99% of the time. When you find one, type that competitor's @username into that spreadsheet next to their name. You get the username by just looking at the URL. It's generally the last thing you see. Now, once you're done with that, you can go back to the search.twitter.com, but we're going to get more advanced with it this time. Oh, would you look at that? It says advanced search right here. Advanced search on Twitter is, well, more advanced than regular search, if that wasn't obvious enough. Look down the page slightly and you'll see a field that says mentioning these accounts. This is where we'll be plugging in those competitors' usernames that we just collected a second ago. I'm just, for example, say, gonna type in @Comcast Cares since it pretty much guarantees that I will find some gems in the search results. Hold on for just a second, don't click search quite yet. Let's enhance the search results just a tad bit more. I personally like to change the written language to English. Why? Well, because like a true American, I don't speak any other languages whatsoever. With this, you can narrow down the search results to stuff you will actually understand by picking whatever language makes sense for your business. For example, let's say we live on the west coast of Ireland. Well, maybe we want to find some people who speak Irish. Yeah, that's a language. Can anyone actually guess how you spell competitor in Irish? Give you a second. You could probably guess it. It's actually pretty easy. Competitor, I-O-M-A-I-T-H-E-O-I-R. Just sound it out. Competitor. Last thing, scroll to the bottom and select both negative and question, because those will get us straight to the complainy people that we kind of want to find. Negative just means tweets that have a negative tone to them, because Twitter can actually search for that. While question means, well, that the person is asking the account a question, and those questions are often pretty passive aggressive, often include complaints. Twitter has mountains of data about how people talk about stuff, and those help filter out all of the positive things people will be tweeting about Comcast, if such a thing even exists. Cool, now let's see what we find. We can use the people in these feeds in a couple different ways. Number one, we can reply directly to the person talking or complaining and intervene in their conversation. Or two, we can send a separate tweet by mentioning the specific person who is talking. The first option can be a little tricky because your competitor will be able to see that you did it. Now, you really shouldn't be worried that much about whether or not your competition is going to see it. And if your competition is, say, like a big company, they're probably not even going to notice this at all, or let alone care that you did it. But if you're in one of these information sensitive situations where you're stealth mode, or you work for a company and your company might notice, then okay, let's try the second technique. In the second technique, just go with the second option that we mentioned and mention the person instead. What this means is that you just start a brand new tweet with that person, shows up on their newsfeed, not on Comcast's newsfeed. In this case, just write something in reference to the tweet you found them from. Here are a few examples of things you could write so you don't come across as that weird stalker-ish sales guy. @username, couldn't help but notice your tweet about such and such competitor. Check out what I'm working on. I think you'll like it. Or how's about another one? @username, I couldn't agree more. Such and such competitor is ridiculous. That's why we created insert your name of your product. You can take it really an infinite number of directions. Whatever you do, just don't say, try my product, and put a link to your website and just leave it like that. You gotta try a little bit harder. A couple more quick things on competitor searches on Twitter that could come in handy here and there. Since it's important to respond to tweets when they are fresh and newly made, it would make sense that, number one, we might not have a whole lot of tweets to hit right now that qualify as brand new and fresh. And two, they probably come in sporadically throughout the day. Now, one way of handling this is to use Twitter's embedded system for saving the searches that have worked out for you. Let's go back to the search we did earlier in this lecture. We can save this search so we can quickly access it later on by clicking on the More dropdown and clicking Save this search. Now you can dip in every once in a while and use the preset searches that you know will find you people. Lastly, you can use a tool like mention.com to send you a notification every time someone mentions one of your competitors. It's sort of like saving a search on Twitter, but it will send you a notification each time there's a new tweet mentioning whatever the keyword or whatever the company you're interested in is. Now, I definitely not recommend using it if your competitor is a company as despised as Comcast, because that is just way too many notifications. All right, so we wrapped up our manual methods of Twitter spamming, and we're on to a much classier form of spamming: forums. I say spamming, although I'm really joking, because this is how virtually all businesses start out, through some form of scrappy manual effort promotion. And that's the way the Lord wanted it. And the one we're gonna cover in this lecture and the next couple lectures is very, very scrappy. Scraptastic, some might say. What's a forum, you might ask? Well, it's any site online where people gather to talk about some specific interest. It's from the ancient Greek, for, meaning to gather, and being the Greek word for StarCraft. Once you have access to these forums, you can then spread your gospel in the most efficient way you want. Best part about this strategy, it really only takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and in 90% of the cases, it's completely free. That's of course if you don't count your time, and well, no one is too busy to troll through some special interest forums. Get over yourself. All right, so we wanted to start taking advantage of these gatherings to get some eyeballs on our page. What's the best way to go about doing that? Well, first off, I want you to know that we're gonna cover 3 different types of online communities. They're all a little bit different, and the strategy for each is therefore going to be different. Now, the first one is a traditional forum that is nameless and hosted at the actual domain of that interest website. Second, we'll cover Slack groups and Slack communities. Don't know what that is, don't worry, we'll get to it. Third, we'll go back to reddit.com to get even more acquainted with that treasure of the internet. To tackle the first group, traditional forums, it's actually relatively easy, and unfortunately, it may or may not work for you if your industry is really obscure. But you really would be surprised, as there are literally hundreds of thousands of forums on the internet, ranging from interior decoration to people who think they are elves to people who like to collect antique phones. Variety. There are 2 different ways really to find a forum. Number 1 is the direct route by just going to Google and typing in the broader category of your industry, plus the word forum, community, or even adding in some of the names of the most common forum softwares, such as PHBBB, vBulletin, and Simple Machines. Believe it or not, between those 3 I just mentioned, vBulletin, PHBB, and Simple Machines, that actually is 93% of all of the online forums. If you have a forum, there's a 93% chance you use one of those. So if you search for that specifically, it's gonna look just for forums. So try to think of a topic that would attract people you wanna talk to and get to look at your product. If you're creating, say, a hardware IT product, you can either look for general technology enthusiast groups, or you can go back to when we wrote down who we think our target users are and then try to deduce maybe what their job is. Instead of generic technology, you could instead look for forums that say, I don't know, for systems admins. Let's say we're selling a new dog collar. Well, you could go specific and search for dog forums by saying something like dog owner or dog lover, plus any of those suffixes that we covered. Or you could go by profession, maybe type in something like animal foster forum or veterinarian forum. Some of these you might honestly strike out with, but in most cases, you'll find something. Take a glance through a couple of the search results and write down the URLs of the places you think, 1, have a sizable enough audience, and 2, are on similar topics to what you're working on, and 3, are something you could easily join, as in you don't actually have to pay to join it, or it isn't something like Product Hunt where you have to be invited to join the community. Yes, if it gives you a flashback to having to find a table to sit at during high school lunch, that terrifies you, well then you're looking at the wrong forum. Let's go ahead and use an example so it's easier to kind of understand. Let's say I was making a product for, say, we'll go back to the thing we used before, productivity. Maybe, let's say it's a SaaS tool that helps you get through your tasks faster throughout the day. I might have, 1 or 2 angles with this. I could Google productivity plus forum, or I could go with something like project manager forum, since project managers are really all about efficiency. It's kind of what their job is. I could even go with something like Get Shit Done forum or Inbox Zero forum or any other buzzword you can really think of. All right, so let's try one of those out. All right, so the first one is, well, not what we're looking for. That is a conference. Great place to do this in real life, but personally, we instead want to hide behind our computers and never see someone's face. The next one in the list is from Stack Exchange, and after taking a peek at it, we can actually tell that yes, this will work. Just as a side note, you'll often notice your topic is actually a subtopic of a bigger forum. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure that the subtopic group itself isn't dead. Make sure to check the date of the last post. Okay, so I would mark this one, Stack Exchange, as a winner. Now, scanning through the others in my list, I can see that there is a Lifehacker article that links to a productivity forum. And if we were going to try that, well, I'll save you some time. It actually takes you to a 404 page. Great. But in the next line, we have Rise forums, which sounds like a god-awful internet marketer forum, and I think it is. But it does actually have a separate section on productivity. So that actually looks pretty promising for what we're trying to do. Both Stack Exchange and Rise Forum are legitimate options for this technique. Okay, so do that for yourself. And if you have trouble, obviously just go and post in the Slack group. You should come away with at least a handful of forums to check out. Generally speaking, when you search and then you click through, you're gonna run into 3 different types of forums. 1, you'll find what's called an open thread forum. 2, you'll find closed thread forums. And 3, you'll find Q&A format forums. In open threaded forums, you'll find the most traditional form of a forum and generally what you get if you use any of those softwares that we previously covered like PHP. In this scenario, anyone can create an account, anyone can post. You can see a list of topics and then a list of maybe subtopics, then a list of threads with the subject of each thread displayed. The original thread creator posts something, could be something they did, or let's say a question they have, and then people respond both to the original poster, often abbreviated as OP, and to each other. Now, a closed forum, on the other hand, it's exactly the same, except the registration to the forum is closed. It could be closed in that you need an invite to join, or closed in that you need to pay money to join. If it costs money, it's really just gonna be up to you whether or not you wanna join. Unless it's some exorbitant amount of money, I generally say go for it, because if the group is relevant, you're gonna wanna be lurking in there anyway. The last type, like we previously saw, is a Q&A forum. The difference here is that the topic of each thread is a question, and the posts after that are going to be directed at that question and not what other people said. The game is a little bit different here, so just keep that in mind. All right, so we know how to find forums, and we know, generally speaking, what types we're going to have to handle. In the next lecture, let's talk about getting into them and actually making some noises. Get as excited as you possibly can. See you then.